the cloud. Why not? Okay.
Okay.
So welcome everybody to Buzz Webinar 1.5, educating the public and pollinator about pollinators and their habitat through signage and public spaces. So with us today, we've got Councillor Ralph Manktelow and from the town of Mono, and Helen Derry, a volunteer with the town of Mono.
Okay.
So hi, and we've got Lorraine from Stratford, and we've got some American guest as well, Jim from Oregon, and Ken, welcome. Could you tell us where you're from? Or you could just type that in, if that's possible. All right, we've got Helen Poplowski. Could you tell us maybe where you're from, Helen? Viewed, okay. All right, so maybe we'll just get started. So see who else is here. Maybe we'll just go around the table and just see if anyone has something they'd like to share. So my name is Shelly. I'm the director of BCD Canada. And I'd like to share a little pollinator story with you this week. It was just, I got an email from a mother and she was telling me about her 9-year-old daughter. They live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and she is so concerned about the bees that she's been going to the library, reading books for the last few years, and has decided to do a presentation in front of her entire school to tell everybody what they should be doing about pollinators. So that's my inspirational pollinator story for the week. Maybe we'll go around and say if anyone has something they'd like to share. Let's see, Lorraine?
We've met with, we're really excited because we've met with our City Parks department, and we're finally getting a pollinator working group. So we're starting that. So that's, to me, that's exciting.
That's fantastic.
Where are you, Lorraine?
In Stratford, Ontario.
Right, Stratford.
We've had advisory committees doing it, but then you don't know who's doing what. So this way, that group will be responsible to keep tabs on everything.
Right. Thank you, Lorraine. I've got a phone number 479-981. Would you like to say something? Tell us who you are, where you're from? Okay, can't hear them. That's okay. Jim from Talent, Oregon.
Yes, go ahead, Shelly. I'm sorry, I was just about to dial Dolly's number on the mobile phone to get her over here and join with me. I don't know if she even knows about this, but anyway, we can see the recording later on, I assume. Did you want me to tell you the brief story about?
Some little story you'd like to share with everybody? Something inspiring, short about pollinators?
Yes. In fact, from a small town like Talent, I think we've got a population of some 6,000 here, down in Southern Oregon in the USA. And through Dolly Warden's contacts with Phyllis, we've gone beginning to get interested in the bee angle in city politics to try to get our public works department behind following through with these policies of trying to get rid of the toxic pesticides they've been using in their city maintenance policies for years and years. And it was very difficult at first. There was politics involved, so we had to try to go take it before council. And so I personally started a draft of an IPM, an integrated pest management policy for the city of Talent. It was received very well. However, there was some resistance through the public works department working hand in hand with the university up in Portland to try to justify the use of these synthetic pesticides. So,
okay, Jim, I don't want to cut you off, but we've got a lot of people here and we'd like to all be able to share something. But thanks for sharing that with us, and congratulations on the great work you're doing.
Thank you. It's official, by the way. That's the last word. It's official. So
okay. Next, did you have something to say or share with us? I got 479-981-10072 where you're from, and No, okay. And Ken, again, we'll try you again. See if you'd like to share something, where you're from. No. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, let's get started. So Helen and Ralph, take it away.
Okay, so I'm afraid to touch the computer for fear you'll lose the screen, but I'm going to try. So it's really nice to be with you today. Shelly, you've asked us to talk about educational signage in our garden. I think you walked through the garden and saw our signage earlier this year, right? So we'll keep the topic to that. It's something that we're quite interested in. So what we'll tell you is what we've done, and it's certainly not the answer for everybody, but to give you some idea of our approach. So first of all, a little bit of background information about us and our garden. Here's a map of Eastern Canada, and you can see, if you know the Great Lakes, just above the arrow, this is Lake Ontario and Toronto, and we're just up here in the boonies a little bit. Here's a closer one, you see Orangeville, and we're about 50 kilometers northwest of Toronto. So that's where we are. And this is an aerial view of our garden. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the history, but you're looking, this is a drone view. So the first thing we did with the development of the garden was to create 2 mounds that were raised areas, because this is an area that sometimes gets water. Here, 3 mounds, 1, 2, 3. And all plants that require some reasonably dry feet will go into there. And around here we have put a hedgerow. We'll talk a bit more about hedgerows. I think they're an important part of the bee protection. This is a trail. It's a trail around us. It's a trail. It was made with wood chips. We recently removed the wood chips and replaced them with a gravel, very fine gravel. And so that's our main garden. And down to the south here, we have an additional area about half as big that we're in the process of trying to decide what to do. We created some groves of trees in it. But let's get back to the main topic here. Here it is from a ground view. You can see we've put a little fence in here, a rail fence, just to sort of act as a margin or a picture frame, if you like. This is the kiosk, and this is the beginning of the trail. You go through the trail here, and the signage is in a sequence. So there's an introductory signage, and then tells you a little bit more as you go around. A few of our flowers. We had very good luck with our first planting. I shouldn't say good luck, because Helen is sitting beside me here, is in charge of planting, and I guess it was all good experience and skill. So a little bit about the history of the garden. We're in our 3rd year here now. In 2015, the town of Mono donated a piece of property to us. It's beside this waterway. This is a waterway which is a part of the upper part of the Credit River, if you know this area. And this is the pollinator garden here, and it's just attached to a road here, which is a hockey road. It's very close to the town of Orangeville, so it's an excellent site for people driving by, and they see our sign and they come in and walk through. It's also close to a trail system which goes all the way around the lake here. So the first year we did our planning. The second year we did weed control. This was a hayfield, and it had not been used for hay for some time. It had become mostly weeds. So we plowed it, disked it, and worked on using good, friendly attempts to control the weeds. We didn't want to use Roundup, of course, or anything like that. The next year, 2017, we put in the plantings. And then last year, it was we got into our educational program. And the educational program is a really, we think it's a big part of the pollinator garden. We think that's the way that it can be valuable. We'll go on here a little bit. The concept of the garden was pretty well established. We had pretty clear goals on what we were trying to do. We'll go into that a bit more. And the idea was that it was going to be run by volunteers. And when we put out a request for volunteers, we had about 35 people who showed up. And this has whittled itself down to 20 odd people who are very active with it. Most of them are active at the garden. Some of them are active in other ways that we need. But let's get into some signage. First of all, when you're thinking of signage, it's important to decide really what is the purpose of your garden? What are you wanting to say? In other words, what is your message? Well, our message was that we were trying to support pollinators, which all of you are trying to do, and we wanted to educate. We felt the education was the real biggie here. So let's go on. Just an aside, education, our educational approach has at least 6 different avenues. Signage is one of them. We also have educational brochures. We've a children's teaching program. We've been giving lectures to various groups. And we've done, I think, 3 lectures, 2 more booked in the next couple of months. We have a part of the town's website, and we have a number of articles that have been in the local press. But let's talk about signage. So it's a really important part of the garden. I think that it gives it a very professional look, and you have a chance to get across messages. So what makes the best interpretive signage? When we were doing this, we started to pay attention to signage in other parks and other recreational areas, and traveled around and looking at other signs. And there were signs such as this one here, which is from Guelph, Pollination Guelph, which is an organization that actually was very influential in getting Helen and I involved. They've had seminars, I think they're into their 12th or 13th now, their annual seminar in the spring. Here's another, some other evidence of signage. We're starting to look at these and realize that some of these signages were probably great information, but most people walking around didn't want to stop and read for a long time. So one of the principles that evolved was try and get across a message and get it across clearly and simply, and don't try and tell too much. Because if you ask people a day after they walk through their garden what they remember, it's probably very little. So you've got a chance to make some really good points, and don't try and make too many. Here's an example of trying to make too many points, I think. So the principles we developed are as follows. Number 1, determine what the key messages are that you'd like to talk about. And we'll show you our 5 key messages. Then with respect to signage, you really want to keep the message simple and the wording straightforward. And 3, if you can afford it, you should get this done professionally. We were fortunate to get a grant from our municipality, and our signage was paid for out of the grant. So key message number 1 is, what is pollination? Not everybody who walks in the garden knows what pollination is and knows why it's important. So that's the first thing, is to establish what pollination is. Second, so we have this slide here, and this slide I think is a good slide because you don't even need to read it to realize what pollination is here. It may not show up on your computer, but this happy looking bee is traveling from this flower to another, and it's got a trail of pollen in it. It's got a little pollen ball in its front legs, and it's delivering it to this flower. So pollination is the transfer of pollen from one flower to another. We won't get into the particular parts of the flower, but that's the idea you want to get across. So key message number 2 is that insects are critical. We know that the wind can, you can get wind pollination. It's important for trees in particular. We know that other birds sometimes are good for pollination, but insects are our main source of pollination. And of all the insects, it's the wild or native bee that's the most important. Very important message. Another important message that was critical, and it's probably what's gotten most of us into this pollination game, is the fact that there's been a loss of insect pollinators. It's estimated that worldwide, the loss of insect pollinators is at least 50% in the last 70 years, since 1950. Well, that's an important message. So we've got a problem. And as you've probably seen the very interesting picture that came from China, where men and women were climbing up in fruit trees and using little paintbrushes to pollinate the blossoms because there were no natural pollinators there. So we need our natural pollinators. They're extremely important. They're important to our crops and to all of our plants that are in the wild. Key message number 4 was that we have a problem because of at least 3 important things: loss of habitat, use of pesticides, and insect diseases. And insect diseases we don't really know much about. I won't get into them because this is not what it's all about, but we do know a lot about insect diseases in the honeybee, which has been fairly well studied, and there are at least 20 different diseases there now. When I started as a beekeeper 25 years ago, I knew of 3. So things have changed a lot. So this is an example of a slide that tells you about the problems with pesticides. So there's some information here on the left-hand side and the right side, and we've emphasized the neonicotinoids. Jim, that may be what you're particularly talking about there in Oregon. We were able to get the municipality to agree to not use neonicotinoids about 5 years ago, and they've kept to it. But even if you don't read this, you probably get the picture here. All these dead insects lying on their back, which is, I think, very, very visual. Key message number 2 is that you, meaning the person who's walking through the garden, can really make a difference. For example, you can provide habitat and you can plant, and you don't need to use pesticides. 3 simple messages. So as you leave our garden, as you walk around the sort of keyhole-shaped pathway and you leave it, you come to this sign here, which tells you what pollinators, what you can do for pollinators. Here's a close-up of it. So it lists 5 different things, and that may be even as too much here, but it's at the end, and we think that it's worth a summary here about choosing the appropriate plants, how to plant them, not using pesticides, and providing habitat for nesting, etc. So the second big thing, now you know what your messages are, is how do you communicate them? Well, it's really important. I think it's very important to make it to be simple, to be very clear, and to make it easy so that anybody can understand it, including school children, which we target, and adults. The process of doing this was very interesting. I communicated some of my ideas to other members of our volunteer committee, and they gave me feedback. And then we did a draft, and we rewrote it. And there were 3 people that looked at the rewrites. I think it was edited a total of 6 times before we thought we had it right. And then I think this is very important. We got somebody to look at it, somebody who's used to communicating. And this is a person who writes to in various popular magazines, and she can communicate on a street level basis very, very well. So she had some good ideas. And then we combined our message with appropriate illustrations. And illustrations are really critical. This pops out here, and it's kind of humorous. It catches your eye. The illustrations are useful for entertainment, catching your eye, and messaging. And one of the things I wish I had done more in ours is to include people in it, because it's all about people. This is one of our school classes, which is being taught by you to hear about planting various types of plants. So illustrations and photos are really, really important. All the people in our garden, almost all of them take photographs. So we've got hundreds, probably Helen has probably thousands of pictures here. and it's a great opportunity to make use of them. And then I'd employ a sign maker, a professional sign maker. Now I know this is expensive, but you want something that is going to catch people's attention. It's going to look professional. It's going to be a clear message, and they take it seriously if it looks good. So to repeat, the principles of effective signage are: be sure of your message, say it very clearly, and keep it simple. But 1 or 2 key points per sign is a good way to go. A little bit about sign construction. So these signs are printed on aluminum blanks. So it's printed right on the blank. It's a very common technique among sign makers. Then we mounted it. You can see the white here. This is PVC, either 1/2 inch or 3/4, depending on the size of the sign. And then this is mounted on a hardwood block, but you can't see it's underneath here. And we mounted it such that the hardwood block was bolted on to bolts that are located just underneath the aluminum here. So nobody could unbolt it. There's no access to it. And then the hardwood block is bolted to a 6x6 cedar post. We put deep holes in, and we pack them with gravel and get it fairly straight. This is was a fairly big job, actually, because we have in Mono, it's an area which the glaciers created a fair bit of the soil, and it's a lot of rocks in it. So putting these in with an auger was a real challenge. And we had about 6 guys that spent most of the day digging these holes and then placing the cedar blocks in and packing them. Put down facing north here. If you want to keep your signs lasting for a while, then try and keep them away from direct sun. They don't actually face north, but we don't have any of them facing due south, so that they get oblique sun, or try not to get very much at all, and that'll give you some longevity to the sun, to the signage. Now, we supplemented the signage with brochures because people often want a little bit more message, and they can't recall it all after a short walk through the garden. So there are brochures that are in a receptacle, and they can take these as they leave the garden, and that gives them additional information, gives them links to more information, etc. Here's our entrance kiosk, and there's some information here. We fund ourselves 3/4 with donations from the community and 1/4 from the town. And so we list donors if they're significant donors here, and that gives them some credit. I think commercial people particularly like that. And this is a sign which tells you a little bit about the garden and its concept. And this is a case over here, which we can put things in. One of our thoughts is that we put in the bloom of the week here. So and we mark them in the garden so people can go around and look at look for it and see what's blooming. And this is a way of educating. Here's a brochure which tells you a little bit about the garden, but it's mainly for fundraising. And so this brochure is available, and on the inside it does some information. On the back it tells you how you can support the garden.
Is this green signs? Or is
No,
this...
not yet.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So I'll just give you some examples of signage. This is the sign that's in the center of that kiosk, which tells you at the bottom how they can get involved, and tells you can join the volunteer committee, and if you want to make a donation, where you can do it. We have some smaller signs and bigger signs. The smaller signs are related to plantings that we would like to suggest, and what we're calling them is superstars. And Helen picked up 4 superstars, which are individual perennials, and we've made a sign for each one of them. This is borage. The others are Culver's root, and what are the other 2?
Agastache and bee balm.
Bee balm. Agastache. Some of these were new to me, and they're quite amazing. The agastache is wonderful. It's good for 5 or 6 weeks, and the bees seem to love it. And then we also feature shrubs. We have 2 signs which explain shrubs, and we've suggested 3 possibilities: the serviceberry, the currant, and the 9-bark, which are all excellent pollinators. And then we also feature trees, and we feature trees that were for damp conditions and feature trees that were for dry conditions. And then we have some individual smaller plant signage, which Helen's going to talk about.
Hi guys. So Ralph's just been talking about the large signs, and in addition to that, we have labeled the individual plants. Not every plant, but we've tried to get at least 1 from every species, from every grouping. So for example, here's a shrub summer sweet, and we tried to put the summer sweets in the same area. So we have several hundred of these. These are 2 by 3, and they're printed on labels that are pretty well weatherproof, UV-proof, waterproof, kick-proof, every proof you can imagine. So they hold up really well in the weather. So we have several hundred with the plant names. And then also it has come up that, we've needed to notify people of various things. For example, areas where we have no mulch at all, and the sign might say no mulch nesting area. So that's to help the volunteers to not mulch there. This is a place where we had spring bulbs, so we don't want people to come in and cover that. So the bulbs will have a chance to come through. Last week, people had a lot, the last time we did this, people were wondering where to get signs. And I spent a huge amount of time searching for this online. It's not simple. You think it would be a really, really simple thing to find. And finally went to a garden center. We just happened to be at a huge garden center, and I noticed they had the stakes and asked them where they got them. And So this company has been a godsend to us. It's inexpensive, and like the signs themselves, they're UV proof. So this is the name of the company. It'll come up again later. They're in Beamsville, Ontario. They will ship all over, as far as I know. And you just, they ship COD. So you just go to the post office and pay for it and pick it up. You don't even have to use a Visa card to get it or a MasterCard. And they have black, they have white, they have different colors, they have different sizes. I'm going to come back to that again later to address some of the concerns that came up the first time we presented. So this is the label. It comes from Avery. I just ordered it online. So you see the number here, 60505. And you won't find this at your local print shop because of the resistances listed here, waterproof, UV proof. They're about $1 a page, and a page has 10 on it. So for $100, you get 1,000 labels. So it's actually very inexpensive. You use their templates to print what you want, and then you use a laser printer and you get all those wonderful waterproof qualities and so on. It also prints in color if you want to do your signs in color. So here's an example of, these are the three labels. So they're 2 by 4. They're not massive, but I blew them up so you could see them. So this says careful cavity nesting area, and you can see you can do it in color. Do not mulch or disturb the soil. So showing some underground nests so people will understand why. And then most native bees do not sting, no male bees sting. So those are just the kind of little things that you might want to have around, as in addition to the big signage, you're giving tiny messages at ground level. This is another example, bumblebee nesting area. It's too dark there, but it isn't in the real one. Watch for ground nests. So a lot of times when we're working, we will see the bees come in with pollen, and you see them going into the small holes. So we created little signs that we could put around, because just because you know where it is doesn't mean the other volunteers do. So it sort of alerts everybody. This is an example of a plant name that you can do in color if you have a lot of time. You just have to find the pictures, and again, protect soil integrity. So don't dig or mulch for the nests. I think that's the same one. Okay, this is, you can see back here, there's a plant sign. So they're not huge. They're, with the stakes, they're 15 inches, and by the time they go into the ground, we bought some black ones. I bought some black ones courtesy of the town. I thought they might be a little more unobtrusive than the whites, so we're going to try that out, or maybe use them for a different kind of message. So when I'm also part of the educational team for the kids, I go into the schools and plan the kids to come, because if you just bring them to the site, it's much too exciting and they don't listen very well because they want to get going and doing. We have activities for them to do. So when I go into the schools, I talk to them a lot. And the first thing they all want to know is about stinging. They look at you like, oh, we're going to get stung. So you deal with that right away. And I tell them, you know, if you don't wave your arms and you don't run and you don't yell and you don't make sudden movements, you aren't going to get stung. And I told the story last time, but I know Shelly liked it. I told the kids that if you see bumblebees and they aren't carrying pollen, they're males and no male bees sting. So they just happily went right up to the bushes and picked the little bees up in their hands to have a closer look, and we're totally unafraid. So just that little bit of education can make such a difference. So these are nesting sites that the kids created. And, you know, I'm under no illusion that the bees are going to be using these, but I think the idea was to get them involved. They realize now that they are in the ground. They tamped the ground down very hard because they knew that the ground needed to be not sandy or easily pulled apart. You need those nice firm nest tunnel walls. So they created these were their own ideas. And this one is a mud top with a little entrance under here. This one is rocks, creating an entrance for them to go in. Well, we'll see what happens next year, but they had a great deal of fun making these habitats. Okay, so I've sort of started with that. So children's education. There are a lot of things they do when they come, after they have their 1-hour introduction to pollination and bees, and especially wild bees. They come, and we have been lucky enough to be able to have shrubs for them to plant. They planted bulbs. And you know, when I told them about planting bulbs, so we didn't plant tulips or those kinds of bulbs. We planted those very, very early blooming ones, the short ones, like Glory of the Snow, and no other names are coming to my brain. Anyway, so I said to them, imagine if you went to your mom and dad in March and said, I'm hungry. And they said, well, don't worry, in May, there will be something for you to eat. So I said, what you're doing by doing this is you're giving that very first meal to some very hungry little bees. So we planted about 2,000 of those very early bulbs last fall. And these kids are planting shrubs, but they plant either shrubs, perennials, bulbs. We've had lots of different activities for them. They planted pumpkins for the squash bees, and they planted sunflowers. So we've had many, many different things depending on what time of year they've come. So these are all pictures of kids working in the garden. As you see, mostly they have their backs to us because you can't take pictures of kids' faces. So we tried very hard not to get faces, but it gives you a different kind of picture. Literature. So these are some things that you can get from the University of Guelph, for example. There were concerns that people didn't have budgets for signage. So this is the kind of thing you can get quite easily. This is about 11 by 14 in real size. This is Heather Holmes' posters. She has posters on probably about 20 different topics. I have contacted her to ask her how she feels about people using her posters in their bee city gardens as a way to have a pre-made thing that covers a lot of topics. So for example, she has, I'm not sure if there was any more here. Oh, this is her book. And I think most of you are very aware of her. So she has topics like ground nesting bees, cavity nesting bees, plants for shade, plants for clay, plants for sand soils. And these are about 8.5 by 11, but you can have them blown up if you're interested in sort of ready-made signs. So she's quite happy for us to use them. But she said if you are going to add text, if you could just show her ahead of time so she can approve it. And then she's quite delighted for you to add extra notes to her signage. This is a really great checklist. So if you did want to hand out literature, I think we're going to hand out some of these. It's from Pollinators of Native Plants. It's also from her book. It's a really good checklist for people to take home with them and just give them ideas. For example, you know, don't have such a tidy garden, leave branches, don't till, don't compost, you know, do compost, don't mulch, how to create nesting areas. So it's a really quick resource, the two sides, the beneficial actions and the destructive actions. This is the, people asked last week about more inexpensive signs. So this is the same company. So they make signs for garden centers. So all of their stuff is waterproof and UV proof. It has to be because the garden centers make their information signs using their equipment. And so it's a great resource if people are looking for that. So they, in addition to Avery, they have their own signs that they will sell you the paper for. And so waterproof outdoor signs, no lamination required for laser printers. And you can see there's a variety of sizes here. So I thought I'd include that since that was a big topic. There were a lot of questions about that at the end of the seminar last time. And then they have the metal posts. So your sign goes into these little slots. You can change it if you want or not change it. They go both horizontally and vertically, and there's a variety of sizes, quite inexpensive. One of these is about $10. So if your budget is a big consideration, that's something that is really good to know. And this is another way of mounting them. Okay, so this was a picture taken in the spring, just before we started 2.5 years ago. And this is a picture of how it looks now. I think it's just amazing. And I will say one thing about our location. We're really lucky. There's something very magical about the soil there. So it's not that, you know, we're such green thumbs so much as the soil is just incredible. And it's really, really helped us out with creating something quickly. And this is our thank you.
Actually, you do really have green thumbs. So I think that's all we have.
Well, thank you so much, Helen and Ralph. That was wonderful. Thanks. That now we have a PowerPoint presentation, and now that it's recorded, we can send it out to all the bee cities. And hopefully we can post that on our website and have all those links as well. So now I'd like to leave it open. I'm going to unmute everyone. Maybe there's some people that haven't been able to share who they are, where they're from. So if you'd like to do that. So now everybody can speak one at a time, I guess. And if there's any questions or anything you'd like to share.
We're not going to touch anything. So can you see us? You just see the slide.
Yeah.
The Heather Holmes downloads are all printable off the Bee City Canada website.
Oh, are they? Okay. And also it's printed on the bottom, her little website.
Okay, that's a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I guess I would just like to say how amazed I am how far you guys came with your plans and how well your garden plots look.
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, it's pretty incredible what you can do within a couple of years, a total transformation. So just imagine what we can do in a couple of years. We can totally transform this country. We put our minds to it. You have to think big, right?
Well, you do. And the success here is really due to a number of things. But really, the biggest thing was passionate people working on the ground. And we've also had a degree of organization, which I think has been helpful. Last night at Council, we just passed a terms of reference for the garden, which is brings in the volunteers into a management group. It'd be a management group of around 9 people. Previously, it was 2 councillors and 2 from Public Works. And so I think this is going to move us into the next era quite successfully and provide some continuity when we're in our rocking chairs with the other people who will understand the garden and be able to carry on with it.
Also, I'd like to point out the currant bush is actually a good planting around gardens as well. They attract the parasitic wasps, and they attack the invasive insects like the tomato hornworm and all that sort of stuff. So it's great to see it's a bee-friendly bush as well.
Yeah, so is that all currants then, Matthew?
My understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
I think that's a really important thing to talk about in gardens is it's not just the plants. People just think it's plants, that they see small things, but that it's shrubs and trees as well. Trees are extremely important for the pollinators.
Oh, and listening to when you're talking about the first blooming things for the hungry bees, my understanding is the dandelions kind of bloom in the beginning, and that's kind of a good food source for the wild bees.
Yeah.
As well as the forsythia shrub. It was one of the first shrubs to bloom. So,
In this part of the world too, the trees are really one of the most early sources of nectar and pollen, particularly willows and maples. And pine also have a lot of pollen, but pine trees, I think they're pretty well pollinated by the wind. One of the other things that I didn't get a chance to talk about was the area that's to the west of us, which is where the wind comes from, where we created a hedgerow. And I think the hedgerow is more of an English term, but it refers to a row of plants which are small plants, shrubs and trees, often which are between fields or between a field and a road. And it provides a very important protection area for small animals as well as bees, and it provides some wind protection because bees don't fly well if there's high winds. So we've got a hedgerow around the west side, and it's about 20 feet wide, and one around the north side. And so it'd be interesting to watch that to grow and develop over the years. As it gets taller, it becomes more of an effective windbreak.
Yeah, Matthew, when I was talking about the bulbs, it was more something for the kids because I am aware about the shrubs and trees being so important. It's to give them an incentive for what they're doing, because it happened to be they were planting shrubs or bulbs at that time. So, but they are in my garden, they bloom mid-March. So they're by far my earliest source here.
We think that getting the kids behind the idea of protecting pollinators is really the way to go. Not only are they the future generation, but they go home to their parents and they will comment to the parent if they're putting pesticide on. Why are you doing that? And they'll. I think that's the way to influence the situation.
So Shelly, if I press stop share, what would happen?
Don't do it.
Oh, don't do it. Let's have a party. Yeah, no, we could do that, and then we just don't see your screen anymore. That's all.
Should I do it? Stop share?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's try it. We won't all disappear. We're still, yay. Okay, so
What do you see? We just see the screen. Oh no.
oh, there. So I think when anyone
You're bad.
Oh no.
Yeah. So Lorraine. So Stratford's a bee city. So what you've seen today, do you think you might be able to implement some of these things?
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful. I think this is one of the best presentations I've gotten the most out of. So I'm really, really thrilled about it.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you gave us a source where we can find the resource at an affordable, at a low cost. Because not all of us have the funding for the big signs. So thank you.
It like I said, it took me months of searching online, and then it was so simple. I just asked at the garden center, and I got what I needed. And I was so happy.
You saved everybody an insurmountable amount of time searching for things, as we all know how long it takes, but you've just made it so easy.
Exactly.
So yeah, extremely, extremely helpful. Let's see. So anyone else have any comments? I just did want to remind everyone about tomorrow. There's a talk as well tomorrow. Dr. Dirk Steinke. They do some pretty amazing things at the Center for Biodiversity at the University of Guelph, and they're planning to do some bee houses, 150 bee houses on schools across Canada. So if you've got lists of some schools, please send them to me. I'm going to forward a list of schools that they're going to contact. So. So Sean and Matthew, you're listening to that? Yeah.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to see that, but I hope Sean I can. I have a meeting with the consultant tomorrow at 10.
Oh, that's so, well, if you can't make it, then just at least we get the names of the schools, and then they can always decide if it's going to work for the school or not, but at least they'll have an opportunity to be on that list. And the same for you, Ralph and Helen, if you know of any schools, high schools in the area. You said you've educated a lot of kids.
Yeah, there we do. I will send you some schools, Shelly.
Yeah, that would be great. And, then the follow-up, that they could become a bee school or maybe at the same time. Just, again, they could do a lot of things in their own schoolyard as well. They could transform the schoolyards as well into some pretty amazing pollinator gardens as well.
Yeah, one of our schools, well, actually two of our schools after coming are making pollinator gardens in their own schools.
So there you go. You inspired them. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think all schools should have these pollinator gardens, growing vegetables and all that. Okay, is there anyone left? Anyone have some comments? Final
I had
comment?
a comment, Jim. I've got a comment about one of the points. It was very well done. Thank you for the labeling information for the gardens. We've tried here some alternatives. We started with the plastic signs, very much like what you showed. I just wanted to make a comment about those. Our experience was, and of course this may be dependent on the source where you get them, many of those brands are indeed not UV tolerant, not for very long. We've had these decompose here in the garden, and they're supposedly professional signs, but they're very much like the examples you showed, that come in different colors. And we found those to become brittle through a couple of seasons and start to snap off or decompose in the garden. And also another issue is the labeling material that goes on them. You can't simply use black felt tip marker or permanent marker. Those will fade within a season. I was shocked at how fast they fade, how impermanent they are. And the labeling also, as you said, has to be a good UV resistant material, but labeling itself tends to be, a synthetic product, very much like plastic. It has ultimately a short life. So, that's a dilemma for some people, trying to find the best and most resilient sources for using these materials.
Yeah, fingers crossed, Jim. It's only our third year coming up, but so far, quite honestly, the plant labels have stayed really precise. Like we haven't had any blurring, we haven't had any wrinkling or anything. They look really, really good. So if it is worthwhile to do the research and buy the right label, you have to look at all those weatherproof, UV proof, waterproof, everything proof qualities.
Yes, you would think that would be a given factor when shopping for garden type materials, but it isn't. You have to be careful and prudent.
Okay, well, we'll keep you posted how they come out at the end of this winter.
Do you pull them out in the winter?
No, we'd never put them back in the right places, so no.
Yeah, I know, I was wondering.
Really big job.
That's a good point.
And the other thing we learned is have the labels ready when the plants arrive. We've done 4 big plantings or 5, and we thought we'd put the labels in after, and then after, it's so hard to find the plant, and you think you do, but so have the labels ready to go in as the plant gets planted and make your life much simpler.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's no further questions or no comments at all, then I want to thank Helen and Ralph again for their wonderful presentation. And this will be very, very useful for all the bee cities. In fact, I think I'm going to send it to all the new bee cities. So there is some really some exciting news too. We are translating the website into French. And so we'll be trying to, make our presence known in Quebec. We've had some call already from Montreal and from Gatineau, and they're really interested in becoming joining the family. So that's pretty exciting.
Sounds excellent. Good for you, Shelly.
Yeah, well, good for all of us, right? Good for the planet too. We need to keep doing things.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks. All right, have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Good. It came down from above there, and I don't know what brought it down. It came down a couple times, and it seemed to come down spontaneously.
Okay.